Professor Zilnax's third set of eyes twitched nervously as they reviewed the student file floating in the holoscreen before them. The document that had thrown the prestigious Galactic Academy into chaos bore a simple classification: human, class 12 Deathworlder. Absolutely unprecedented, they muttered, their crystalline exoskeleton catching the soft blue light of their office. In 300 cycles of teaching xenobiology and survival sciences, they had never encountered a species above Class 8. Even the notorious Chronax warriors, with their natural armor and toxic breath, barely qualified as Class 9. A gentle chime announced the arrival of their first-period students. Zilnax composed themselves, spreading their sensory fronds in what they hoped was a welcoming gesture. The classroom doors whispered open, admitting a stream of diverse beings from across the galaxy. Hovering gas forms, crystalline entities, and various bipedal species took their places at the adaptive learning stations. Then he walked in. Daniel Chen looked nothing like the monster Zilnax had imagined. He was shorter than several other species present, with no obvious defensive capabilities. No claws, no armor, not even basic radiation shielding. Just soft pink skin and plain dark clothing. The only remarkable feature was the way he moved, a smooth, efficient gait that spoke of well-developed proprioception. "Welcome, students, to Advanced Xenobiology," Zilnax announced, their translator converting their crystalline harmonics into standard galactic common. "Today we begin our practical studies of environmental adaptation." The first exercise was simple: each student would demonstrate their species' natural defensive capabilities. The Chronax student released an impressive cloud of toxins. A Photonian generated a dazzling energy shield. The Void-born student temporarily phased out of normal spacetime. When Daniel's turn came, he stood quietly at his station. Several students leaned away, whispering about Deathworlder capabilities. "I don't really have any natural defenses," Daniel said with a small shrug. "Humans are pretty ordinary." Zilnax's observation fronds quivered. "Surely you must have something. Your species survived on a Class 12 planet." "Well, we're adaptable, I guess. We can learn from our mistakes. We're pretty good at solving problems." Daniel seemed almost apologetic. Zilnax was about to mark down a disappointing evaluation when their primary sensors detected something extraordinary. While Daniel spoke, his body was unconsciously performing dozens of micro-adjustments, compensating for the station's artificial gravity, adjusting to the alien atmosphere mix, even subtly shifting his stance to maintain optimal distance from his nearest classmates. The professor's crystalline structure vibrated with excitement. Their sensors couldn't be wrong. This seemingly unremarkable being was performing more environmental calculations per second than most species needed in a full-day cycle. And he wasn't even aware he was doing it. As the class concluded, Zilnax added a private note to Daniel's file: "Initial observation suggests human claims of being ordinary may be their most extraordinary deception. Further study required." They had no idea just how right they were. Professor Zilnax's discovery about Daniel's unconscious adaptability led to a subtle but significant change in their teaching methodology. Instead of standard demonstrations, they began introducing what they called environmental challenges into each class session. Today's challenge involved atmospheric variation. The classroom's environmental controls could simulate different planetary conditions, and Zilnax had programmed a sequence of increasingly difficult scenarios. "Your survival suits will protect you from extreme conditions," Zilnax explained, their crystalline form gleaming under the artificial lights. "But you must learn to recognize and respond to environmental changes before your equipment fails." The first simulation recreated the methane storms of Titan. The Chronax student, Grex, immediately activated their triple-layered membrane. The Photonian, Luz, transformed their outer shell into a reflective barrier. Each species relied on their evolved defensive mechanisms. Daniel, however, did something unexpected. While others activated their protective gear, he began taking notes about the atmospheric composition displayed on his station's screen. The simulation shifted to the crushing pressure of Venus. Several students struggled with their equipment, their natural defenses proving insufficient. A void-born named Nexus phased in and out of reality, clearly distressed. "Chen," Grex rumbled through their toxin sacs, "your suit is only at minimal power. You'll be crushed." But Daniel remained calm, making minute adjustments to his suit's settings rather than engaging full protection. His readings showed dangerous pressure levels, yet his vital signs remained stable. Zilnax's observation fronds trembled with excitement. While other students fought against each environmental challenge, Daniel was doing something entirely different. He was learning from each scenario, adjusting his responses based on previous results, and using minimal energy to achieve optimal outcomes. The final simulation combined multiple extreme conditions. As emergency alerts flashed across survival suits, Daniel raised his hand. "Professor," he said, still taking notes, "I noticed something interesting. The atmospheric changes follow a pattern. If you track the molecular composition shifts, you can predict the next variation and prepare in advance." The classroom fell silent. Even Zilnax's crystalline structure stopped humming momentarily. That's not part of the exercise," they managed to say. "Oh." Daniel looked embarrassed. "Sorry. It's just that humans are used to looking for patterns. When our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, we had to predict weather changes, animal migrations, seasonal variations. I guess it became instinct after a while." Zilnax quickly accessed the simulation data. Daniel was right, there was a pattern, but it was incredibly complex, involving hundreds of variables. They had included it unintentionally while programming the sequence. Yet this human had detected it, analyzed it, and adapted to it, all while appearing to simply take notes. After class, Zilnax added another entry to their growing research file: "Human adaptive capabilities extend beyond physical responses. They possess an extraordinary ability to detect patterns in chaos and learn from them in real time. Most remarkable, they seem to consider this ordinary." As they filed the report, their sensors detected unusual activity in the Academy's administrative network. Searches about humans and Death World species had increased by 300% in the past cycle. They weren't the only one who had noticed something extraordinary about their newest student. The question was, who else was watching? Professor Zilnax was in the middle of explaining nutrient absorption variations across species when Dean Vorox burst into the classroom, their plasma-based form crackling with unusual intensity. "Professor, a word?" The dean's voice carried an edge that made every student's survival instincts tingle. In the hallway, Vorox's plasma field pulsed with agitation. "The Academy has received a challenge from the Centaurian Institute of Higher Learning. They're proposing an inter-academy survival competition." Zilnax's crystalline structure dimmed slightly. The Centaurian Institute was their oldest rival, known for its aggressive teaching methods and strict anti-Deathworlder policies. "They specifically requested your class participate," Vorox continued. "They've somehow learned about your human student." Back in the classroom, Daniel was helping Nexus adjust their phase shift calculations. The Void-born student had been struggling with maintaining solid form during high-stress situations, and Daniel had noticed a pattern in their fluctuations. "Try counting your phase shifts," he suggested. "Humans use heartbeats to measure time during stress. Maybe you could use phase shifts the same way." Nexus's form stabilized noticeably. "That's remarkably simple. How did you think of that?" Before Daniel could answer, Zilnax returned, their crystal facets arranged in what the class had learned to recognize as concern. "Students, I have an announcement. We've been challenged to participate in an inter-academy survival competition." Their secondary eyes fixed on Daniel. "Participation is voluntary, but all team members must compete in all events." The classroom erupted in excited chatter. The Centaurian Institute was legendary, its graduates holding positions throughout the galaxy. But there was an undercurrent of tension. Everyone knew about their stance on Deathworlders. "I volunteer," Grex announced, their toxin sacs swelling with pride. The Kronax never back down from a challenge. "The Photonian Collective will participate," Luz shimmered, their light-based form brightening. One by one, students volunteered until only Daniel remained silent. "Chen," Zilnax prompted. "You are not obligated to." "I'll do it," Daniel said quietly, still helping Nexus with their calculations. "But I think Nexus should lead the team." Another silence fell, heavier than the first. Nexus's form wavered in surprise. "But I'm the least stable," they protested. "My species isn't known for leadership." "Exactly," Daniel replied. "You understand what it's like to struggle. You know how to adapt because you have to do it constantly. That's what this competition will be about, isn't it, Professor?" Zilnax's crystalline structure hummed in astonishment. Once again, the human had seen a pattern others missed. The Centaurians wouldn't just be testing survival skills, they'd be testing adaptability. Later that day, Zilnax found an urgent message in their research files. It was from a highly encrypted source. "Warning, Centaurian challenge is not what it seems. Human participation may trigger Protocol X-12. Recommend immediate withdrawal." But when they tried to access more information about Protocol X-12, every database returned the same response: access denied. Deathworlder containment directive in effect. Zilnax's structure chilled. What had they gotten their students into? And why did the galaxy's most prestigious institutions seem so afraid of one ordinary human? As they pondered this, their sensors detected Daniel in the training room, running simulation after simulation, learning from each failure, adapting, improving. But most interestingly, he was running the simulations at triple normal gravity, not because he had to, but because he'd noticed that Nexus performed better in high-gravity environments. He wasn't just adapting to the challenge. He was adapting to help others adapt. And somehow, that seemed more dangerous than any natural weapon could ever be. The Centaurian Institute's competition arena sprawled across an entire asteroid, its surface dotted with biodomes simulating various extreme environments. As the Galactic Academy team's transport approached, Daniel noticed something odd about the facility's layout. "Those aren't just random placements," he murmured, sketching the pattern on his datapad. "The biodomes form a spiral. Each one's conditions must affect the next." Nexus phased slightly in anxiety. "Is that important?" "Everything's important," Daniel replied, still sketching. "Humans learned that the hard way. On Earth, ignoring small details got people killed." Professor Zilnax's crystalline form vibrated with concern. They still hadn't decoded the warning about Protocol X-12, and their attempts to investigate had been met with increasingly rigid security blocks. The arena's main chamber hummed with energy as teams from 12 different academies gathered. The Centaurian Institute's team stood apart, their cybernetically enhanced forms gleaming under the artificial lights. Their leader, a towering figure named Apex, fixed their optical sensors on Daniel. "A Deathworlder," they announced, voice carrying across the chamber. "How primitive. Surely the Galactic Academy hasn't fallen so far?" Before anyone could respond, the competition director's hologram materialized above the arena. "Welcome to the Interstellar Survival Championships. Your first challenge begins immediately." The chamber's atmosphere shifted instantly. Several teams activated their survival suits as the temperature plummeted. But Daniel held up his hand, stopping his team from doing the same. "Wait," he said, watching his breath crystallize. "Look at the ice formation pattern." The other teams were already deploying thermal shields, using energy reserves to fight the cold. But Daniel pointed to the ceiling, where frost was forming in distinct lines. It's not just getting colder, he explained. The humidity is being manipulated. These conditions, they're similar to something I studied in Earth's history. The Little Ice Age. How does that help us? Grex rumbled, their toxin sacs contracting in the cold. During that time, humans didn't have technology to fight the cold. We had to adapt. Daniel began drawing in the frost collecting on the floor. We learned to read weather patterns, to predict temperature shifts. And most importantly, we learned that fighting nature takes more energy than working with it. The team watched as other competitors' energy reserves dropped rapidly. The Centaurian team's cybernetic systems were already showing signs of strain. Nexus, Daniel continued, your phase shifting generates heat, right? And Luz, you can reflect thermal energy. Grex, your toxin sacs can act as insulation. We don't need to fight the cold individually. We can create a microclimate together. Working as one, they positioned themselves in a formation based on Daniel's frost drawings. Nexus phased rhythmically, generating heat pulses that Luz reflected in a controlled pattern. Grex's toxin sacs trapped the warmth, creating a sustainable bubble of survivable temperature. But as other teams began dropping out, their energy reserves depleted, Daniel noticed something disturbing. The Centaurian team wasn't just competing, they were gathering data, their sensors constantly directed at him. Then it happened. As the chamber temperature hit its lowest point, all systems suddenly failed. Emergency lights flashed as the facility's power grid crashed. In the darkness, Daniel heard Apex's voice. Protocol X-12 initiated. Containment fields active. The true test begins now, Deathworlder. The darkness came alive with energy fields, cutting off escape routes. But instead of panic, Daniel felt an odd sense of calm. This, finally, made sense. The entire competition had been a setup. Professor, he called out, his voice steady in the chaos, I think I know why they're so afraid of humans. Why? Zilnax's crystalline form glowed faintly in the darkness. Because we've been in this situation before. Not this exact one, but something like it. Every major breakthrough in human history came when we were trapped, when failure meant extinction. And every time, we did the one thing other species find hardest to understand. What's that? Nexus asked, their form flickering anxiously. Daniel smiled in the darkness, already formulating a plan that would either save them all or doom them completely. We chose to change ourselves instead of the environment. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. As containment fields hummed with deadly energy, Daniel began explaining his plan, a plan so counterintuitive, so seemingly suicidal, that it could only have come from a species that had evolved on a death world. A plan that would prove, once and for all, why humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to survive, but their willingness to risk everything to help others do the same. We need to fail, Daniel announced in the darkness, his words causing confusion among his teammates. Fail? Grex's toxin sacs pulsed with agitation. The containment fields will kill us. No, Daniel said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of human survival knowledge. They're designed to contain what they think we are. But that's their mistake. They designed this trap for a Deathworlder, someone who survives through strength. But that's not what makes humans dangerous. Professor Zilnax's crystalline structure vibrated as understanding dawned. Your species' true advantage, it's not your ability to survive harsh conditions. It's our ability to learn from failure, Daniel confirmed. Every human achievement came after countless failures. We failed our way to fire, to flight, to space travel. We failed until failure taught us how to succeed. In the darkness, Apex's voice carried a note of confusion. Your survival strategies are being recorded and analyzed. Protocol X-12 will establish containment parameters for all Deathworld species. You can't, Daniel replied, a hint of pity in his voice. You can't contain what's always changing. Watch. He turned to his team. Everyone, power down your survival suits. Completely. That's suicide. Luz flickered in alarm. Trust me, Daniel said softly. Humans have a saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results. They expect us to fight harder, to be stronger. So we're going to do something entirely different. One by one, survival suits powered down. The chamber's brutal conditions hit them immediately: sub-zero temperatures, toxic atmosphere, crushing pressure. Warning signals blared across the facility. Now, Daniel continued through chattering teeth: Nexus, phase shift, but not to escape. Phase until you find the frequency of the containment fields. As Nexus shifted through quantum states, Daniel turned to Luz. When Nexus finds the frequency, reflect it. Not to break the fields, but to resonate with them. Grex, your toxins can conduct energy, right? Release them in a pattern matching the resonance. This is unprecedented, Apex's voice carried an edge of concern. Protocol X-12 requires immediate termination if containment is threatened. But something extraordinary was happening. As Nexus phased in harmony with the containment fields, Luz reflected the energy pattern, and Grex's toxins conducted it. The deadly barriers began to change. Instead of containing them, the fields were becoming part of them. Impossible, Apex whispered. The fields are adapting? No, Daniel corrected, his body shivering but his mind clear. We're adapting. We're learning what the fields can teach us. That's humanity's real power. We don't just survive our failures, we learn from them. We change ourselves to match the challenge. Professor Zilnax's sensors were recording everything, their crystalline form humming with excitement. The containment protocol, you're not breaking it. You're becoming part of it. The chamber's systems struggled to compensate as the team's strategy created something entirely new, a symbiotic relationship between the containment fields and the contained. The more the system tried to adapt its containment protocols, the more data it provided for further adaptation. This is why Earth is classified as a death world, Daniel explained through the transformation. Not because it's harsh, but because it never stops changing. Every solution becomes a new challenge. The only way to survive is to never stop learning, never stop adapting. As the containment fields flickered and reformed around them, Apex's voice carried a new emotion: awe. Protocol X-12 was designed to contain the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But you've turned it into a teaching tool, Daniel finished. Because that's what humans do. We turn our prisons into laboratories, our obstacles into opportunities. We don't just survive, we learn, we change, we grow. And most importantly, he looked at his teammates, each of them now glowing with the transformed energy of the containment fields. We teach others to do the same. The facility's systems finally overloaded, unable to compute the paradox of a containment protocol that had become a catalyst for evolution. As emergency lights flickered back on, Professor Zilnax made their final observation. Perhaps this is why the galaxy feared Deathworlders. Not for their strength, but for their ability to turn any attempt to contain them into an opportunity for universal growth. And in that moment, as teams from 12 academies witnessed the transformation, everyone understood, they weren't just seeing the power of human adaptation. They were seeing the future of galactic evolution itself. The aftermath of Protocol X-12's transformation rippled through the Centaurian Institute's facility like a quantum wave. Emergency systems struggled to compensate for the unprecedented integration of containment fields with organic life forms. But something far more significant was happening in the facility's secure data center. The archives are unlocking themselves, Professor Zilnax announced, their crystalline form reflecting cascading streams of data. The containment protocol's transformation, it's triggering a failsafe we weren't meant to find. Daniel watched as ancient records filled the facility's holoscreens. "These aren't just containment protocols," he said quietly. "They're extinction records." The truth revealed itself in fragments of data, hundreds of species classified as Deathworlders throughout galactic history, each subjected to increasingly sophisticated containment protocols. But Earth's humans weren't just the latest targets, they were the first to survive long enough to expose the pattern. "I don't understand," Nexus phased anxiously. "Why contain species with adaptive capabilities? Wouldn't the galaxy benefit from such diversity?" Apex stepped forward, their cybernetic systems still recalibrating from the protocol's transformation. "Because adaptation is unpredictable. The Galactic Council believed controlled evolution was safer. Each species assigned specific roles, specific limitations. A galaxy-wide experiment in selective evolution," Daniel finished, his voice heavy with understanding. "But Earth was an uncontrolled variable. A planet so harsh it forced constant adaptation." Suddenly, the facility's deepest security systems activated. Massive doors sealed shut as ancient defense protocols initiated. On the central holoscreen, a message flashed in every known galactic language. "Deathworlder integration protocol initiated. Containment status, failed. Emergency procedure, terminal sterilization of facility." "They'd rather destroy everything than let adaptive evolution spread," Grex rumbled, their toxin sacs contracting in anger. But Daniel was already moving, his mind racing through possibilities. "Professor, the records, do they show how many species were successfully contained?" Zilnax's sensors raced through the data. "Thousands. All redirected into specialized evolutionary paths. Except humans," Daniel nodded. "Because we never evolved to be the strongest or the fastest. We evolved to be." He paused, looking at his diverse team. "To be exactly what we're being right now. Connectors. Adapters. Teachers." The facility's sterilization countdown continued, but Daniel's expression shifted from concern to revelation. "Everyone, remember how the biodomes were arranged in a spiral? It wasn't random. This whole facility is designed like Earth's extinct Nautilus shells, a logarithmic spiral. How does that help us?" Luz flickered uncertainly. "Because that's not just an Earth pattern, it's universal. The same spiral appears in galaxies, hurricanes, unfolding ferns. It's nature's way of distributing energy efficiently." Daniel's eyes lit up with understanding. "They didn't just build this place to contain us. They built it to contain a fundamental law of nature itself, the tendency of life to grow in all possible directions." The team gathered around as Daniel quickly explained his plan. It was audacious, unprecedented, and like every great human innovation, born from the fusion of desperate necessity and boundless creativity. "If we succeed," Apex warned, their cybernetic systems calculating the odds, "we won't just be changing this facility. We'll be changing the direction of galactic evolution itself." Daniel looked at his teammates, a Voidborn learning to stabilize, a Photonian discovering new ways to reflect energy, a Chronax exploring the protective uses of toxins, and a crystalline professor vibrating with the excitement of discovery. "Maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs," he said. "Not controlled evolution, but shared evolution. Not just surviving together, but growing together." As the sterilization protocol counted down, the team began implementing Daniel's plan, a plan that would either mark the end of the galaxy's great experiment in controlled evolution, or the beginning of something far more extraordinary, a galaxy where diversity wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated as the driving force of cosmic advancement. And in the depths of space, on countless worlds classified as too harsh for intelligent life, something stirred, as if the very concept of what it meant to be a Deathworlder was about to change forever. The facility's sterilization countdown echoed through ancient halls as Daniel's team positioned themselves along the logarithmic spiral of biodomes. Each member stood at a precise point, their positions matching the natural growth pattern that shaped galaxies and nautilus shells alike. "Life always finds a way," Daniel said, his voice carrying the weight of Earth's long evolutionary journey. "Not by fighting natural patterns, but by becoming part of them." Professor Zilnax's crystalline form hummed with understanding. "Just as you did with the containment fields." "Exactly," Daniel nodded. "Every species here was classified as dangerous because they had unique adaptive abilities. But adaptation isn't about becoming the strongest, it's about finding your place in the greater pattern." The sterilization protocol reached its final phase. Emergency systems prepared to release energy that would eliminate all life in the facility. But as the energy began to flow, something extraordinary happened. Nexus phased in rhythm with the facility's power grid, their quantum fluctuations matching the spiral pattern. Luz captured and redirected energy through their photonic form, creating a cascade of light that followed the same natural logarithm. Grexa's toxins, rather than attacking, formed protective barriers that spiraled through the chamber. "The pattern wants to complete itself," Daniel explained, his voice steady despite the mounting energy. "Life doesn't want to be contained, it wants to connect." Professor Zilnax extended their crystalline structures, joining the pattern. Even Apex, understanding at last, allowed their cybernetic systems to synchronize with the growing harmony. As the sterilization energy reached its peak, instead of destroying life, it became part of the very pattern it was meant to disrupt. The facility's ancient systems encountered something they had never been programmed to handle: life that didn't resist destruction, but transformed it into creation. In the control center, thousands of years of containment protocols rewrote themselves. The true history of galactic evolution emerged, not a story of controlled development, but a vast tapestry of interconnected adaptations. "This is why Earth was classified as a death world," Daniel said softly, watching the transformation. "Not because it was too harsh for life, but because it taught us something the Galactic Council feared, that true strength comes from connection, not isolation. From sharing our adaptations, not containing them." The facility's quantum computers, faced with this paradox, made the only logical choice: they evolved. Emergency protocols transformed into communication channels. Containment barriers became bridges between species. The very systems designed to prevent uncontrolled evolution became tools for sharing evolutionary insights. As the transformed energy settled, Professor Zilnax accessed the facility's new archives. The classification system, it's rewriting itself. Deathworlder is being redefined. "What does it say now?" Nexus asked, their form stable despite the incredible energies they had channeled. "Deathworlder," Zilnax read, their voice filled with wonder, "a species whose adaptive capabilities serve as a catalyst for collective evolution." "There's more. Primary example, humans, specialized in teaching other species how to transform survival challenges into opportunities for growth." The team gathered around Daniel, each member forever changed by their experience. Grexa's toxins now served as a communication medium. Luz had learned to nurture rather than just reflect. Nexus's instability had become a bridge between quantum states. "I understand now," Apex said, their cybernetic systems humming with new purpose. The Council feared Deathworlders not because they might destroy galactic civilization, but because they would transform it, Daniel finished. "Just as Earth transformed us. Every hardship, every failure, every near-extinction taught us the same lesson: life thrives not by dominating its environment, but by learning from it. By teaching others what it has learned. By turning every ending into a new beginning." As news of the facility's transformation spread across galactic networks, something stirred in the collective consciousness of countless worlds. Species long contained by artificial limitations began to remember their adaptive heritage. The age of controlled evolution was ending. A new era of shared growth was beginning. And in a classroom at the Galactic Academy, Professor Zilnax added one final note to their research: the true power of humanity lies not in their ability to survive on a death world, but in their gift for turning survival into a lesson that all species can learn from. They remind us that in the end, life's greatest adaptation is its ability to help other life adapt. Daniel Chen, the unremarkable human who had changed galactic history, simply smiled and went back to helping his classmates with their studies. After all, that's what humans do best: they learn, they adapt, and most importantly, they teach others to do the same. For in the grand pattern of cosmic evolution, the greatest strength isn't survival of the fittest, but the ability to help all life find its place in the ever-expanding spiral of existence.